Welcome to the Hobby Jogger Podcast, where elite athletes and ham and eggers lace up their stories. We explore the common ground that running creates, from the world-class runner to the hobbyist hitting the pavement, trail, or treadmill. Expect a blend of inspiration, laughter, and the shared joy that makes every step count. Join us on this journey where every run is a story worth sharing. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of The Hobby Jogger. I am once again joined by my co-host, Mr. Rob Myers. Rob, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm down in beautiful, sunny Dallas, Texas for work. And yeah, it's a beautiful day sitting in the hotel.
Least favorite airport ever, Dallas. You got to ride the little cart around, the little horseshoe. Sometimes it goes your way. It's basically like playing airplane roulette. I don't like it. I try and fly through Denver when I go out west, but what can you do?
Smart move.
Yeah, very smart. Well, Rob, this week's guest, we are joined by one of our friends, Mr. Michael Weinsheimer. Mike, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing pretty well. I appreciate you guys having me. I do have to do a name correction though. It's Weinsheimer.
Weinsheimer. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me correct that.
That's happened like 17 times, so don't feel bad, Mike.
Yeah. Happens every day.
I don't know why I said, yeah, I guess that, yeah, it's definitely, that's bad. I'm a Yinzer, we pronounce things wrong all the time. So
I was referring to Casey's pronunciation, right? We've had quite a few guests. Their names were said with great confidence, and it happened to be wrong. So
I did get Rachel Tamayachek's name correct, but then I guess her husband changed the pronunciation of the name, so I was incorrect. I don't know, but anyway, sorry about that, Mr. Michael. Apologize, but thanks for joining us.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity. I always love talking shop.
Yeah. Anytime you get to talk running, and I feel like you have a pretty unique story. Anytime in running, whether it's a 5K, 10K, half marathon, 50K and above, things have a tendency to go wrong, correct?
Always. Well, there's always the possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd say tendency, but there's a possibility. Absolutely. Things can go sideways.
Yeah. About 80% of the time, things go wrong, I would say. So, from my experience. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I'd say 80, 90%. I think there's very few things in life that you start out, whatever the activity is, with great confidence. And then the opposite happens, where you have the lowest experience you've ever had. And then the confidence comes back up and the yo-yo effect continues. I can't think of anything else that is like that over a long period of time.
I mean, just in life in general, it's more of how you recover from the things that go wrong, and
100%.
And deal with those and become better and take advantage of situations that you have. And Mike, you had a very unique situation that happened to you. You were signed up for the Canyons 100K. You ran in the Canyons 100K. You did not run 100K, and you got what we dubbed the pivot, correct?
That is that's the title of the Strava file. With an interesting subtitle to follow, but I'm calling it a pivot. This was my first stab at 100K, so I was stepping up in distance, and I've only been at this running thing for 5 years or so. So my history in the sport is, I guess, relatively short. I started it at age 45, now 50, plugging away as best I can. Canyons was to be my first stab at that distance. I think we all have our preferences, strengths, weaknesses. Mine being I'm fairly durable, and I also perform fairly well in warm conditions, not so well in cold conditions. When you sign up for a Canyons, you're thinking, well, I'm signing up for a warm weather race. Might start cool, but, and so that was obviously what I had trained for. A good deal of heat training involved and whatnot. And as we're getting closer to the race, you could see the weather, the trajectory wasn't on that trajectory. It was going to be cool. It ended up being quite cold.
Yeah, and Rob, you ran the 50K as well. And it was not what I expected. I wanted a hot race because I'd much prefer to run in the hot weather than cold and rain that we had, it was basically we took the Ohio weather, transported it out to sunny, beautiful California, minus the mud. There was no mud on that course. What I thought was mud. Yeah, big change in weather, big change in how we train, Mike, because you said you were, training for the heat. Did you do a lot of sauna?
I did some sauna, and I'm not sure, frankly, that my training would have been all that different, because I try to stay heat acclimated, at least to some extent, all of the time. As I travel to race, and oftentimes that may be at altitude, so the heat training can help in that regard as well, in terms of blood plasma volume and so forth. But yeah, I think it was more just from a mental preparation standpoint, right? I was just expecting to run in a warm weather race. I think another big factor for me personally, when you speak of, strengths, weaknesses, limitations, is that, I have the Raynaud's syndrome.
Explain real quick what that is.
It's a circulatory thing, and I can't really speak to it from a causal standpoint, but I could certainly speak to it from a symptomatic standpoint. And when I bring it up to people and I say, I have Raynaud's, they're like, oh, me too, right? Like, I can't feel my hands when it's cold, So I do think there's certainly a spectrum on which I would say, on the extreme end. If it's sub 55 degrees Fahrenheit, you're likely going to see me out there running with gloves on, if not mittens. And so it's just something I have to deal with, after say 45 to 60 minutes, my hands just start to lose feeling, and every bit as much lose dexterity. And that of course can be quite hurtful when it comes to executing long trail races. You have to be able to tear open gels. You have to be able to take caps off of water bottles and so forth, and you have to have that dexterity. So that in and of itself creates a big challenge. When I saw the forecast, I brought two pairs of gloves with me. I had like a lightweight, merino wool glove, and then like an over mitt, like a waterproof black diamond over mitt that I thought would be substantial enough. This race starts out 5,000 feet elevation. First of all, for those who don't know, Canyons is a point-to-point race. It starts, like I said, at 5,000 feet elevation, north of Auburn, kind of net downhill, again, point-to-point, ending in downtown Auburn. And by the way, it starts at the China Wall Trailhead in the Tahoe National Forest, follows part of the Western States course, but not to any exactitude. But
yeah, and one thing I would like to point out, if you look at the course on just the topography of the website, maybe it's my computer that it shows up maybe not as severe as it is, but there is a lot of elevation gain and lost. And like Mike said, you do start out, it's point to point, you start out pretty high. So cold weather, if it's cold at the bottom, it's gonna be real cold at the top, right, Mike?
Absolutely. So the forecasted highs at the finish were in the low 50s with persistent rain all day. But up high, it was, we're talking just a hair over freezing, 32, 33 degrees, wet snow coming down. And of course, this is a 5 a.m. start, so it's dark, right? So you're dealing with the inherent difficulty of running in the dark, headlamp, and then you have the precip coming down in snow form. So, they shuttle everybody from Auburn up to China Wall Trailhead to start this race. That whole process begins at like 2:00 in the morning. You're up, you're driving to the shuttle pickup, and then you're 45 minutes on a shuttle bus up to the trailhead. Turns out one of the shuttle buses with a group of runners actually broke down on the way up there. That delayed the race start by 10 minutes. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're kind of standing there, like,
it was one of the reasons I didn't run that race, was because of I don't know. I just want to be dropped off at the start and say go. Like I want to roll in 2 minutes before the thing starts, walk out to the start line and go. Like that's tough. I don't know. Like riding the shuttle bus, I get car sick. I know I sound like a baby, Rob. I know.
Fortunately, it wasn't a very windy road. But, it was a straight shot up there. But I mean, it's still a 45-minute drive and it just kind of lengthens the day, So I probably could have chosen an easier first 100K.
So you get up there and it's snowing at the start, right?
Snowing at the start. Yeah. And, again, everybody kind of was equipped to deal with cold or heat differently. I mean, I saw, some of the elites were in tank tops with gloves on, right? But in tank tops nonetheless, others, were pretty well bundled up. I thought I had what I needed with me. I had the cold weather kit, everything that was mandatory I had, and some. The strategy at least was to try to keep my core warm that would hopefully extend to the extremities. And gun goes off, 5:10 a.m. start. Out of the gates we go. First 8 miles of the race are like a pretty steady downhill. Ideal conditions, quite runnable. But everyone was kind of taking that with caution from what I could tell. And, I'm a mid-pack runner. So obviously the folks that were fast enough got out in front and could do what they wanted. But it was a conga line, and probably for the better. It probably kept a lot of runners in check, to be honest, because it got slick out there. And I mean, by Ohio standards, it wasn't muddy, that shoe-eating type of mud, right? But it was that kind of slick. I don't know if you've dealt with any mud like on the Hawaiian Islands, but I'd almost compare it to that. It was, that soil there in Northern California is very clay-like, and when it gets wet, it's slick. It's like ice-like, and people were taking spills. So that it was treacherous.
Yeah, I saw a couple wipeouts during the 50K. Yeah, it was a little bit slippery. It's like, it's not shoe eating mud that we have out here, but just, it was slippery because and I don't know the science behind it, but it's trails that are used often, and then they get there every now and then rain, and it seems to become slick on top. I don't know. Rob, do you know how that works?
Well, we had a little bit of that Black Canyons at the start.
Yeah.
At the first 4 miles. There was ice everywhere. The mud was frozen. It was super slick. You can definitely relate. It also kind of sounds like the Mo Marathon a little bit. Every once in a while, you get that freeze in the morning.
Yeah.
The beginning of the Mo, and there's ice everywhere. You're sliding all over the place. So it's nasty when you have to wait, sometimes hours for it to warm up, or the elevation to change, the terrain to change. Yeah, it's brutal.
Hey folks, if you're loving the stories, tips, and laughs we're dishing out, make sure you don't miss an episode. Hit that subscribe button so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. And hey, if you've got a second, why not leave us a review? Your feedback helps us improve and keeps this running community growing. Lace up, hit subscribe, and let's get back into the show.
I will say, Casey, from a pure running standpoint, I wasn't the least bit bothered. I'll be honest with you. I really wasn't. I was moving well. There were no turned ankles. There were no slips. There were no trips. I was running cautiously and pretty comfortably, frankly.
One thing I'll say is our trails here are much tougher to run than those trails. Our trails are an obstacle course. Those trails, it's like, I told friend of the show, Will, that it's like our towpath with some elevation on it. Most of the trails that we ran out there, there's some ups and downs, but I don't know, Rob. I thought it was pretty smooth.
I don't know. It's the towpath. I mean, definitely closer to that, maybe, but definitely not the towpath.
If I just say between towpath and Laurel Highlands, it's much closer to the towpath than it was Laurel Highlands.
Okay, that's fair.
I think, but I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't know. I'm a hobby jogger.
Now, I would argue that up high, again, on the front end of the 100K course, I would venture to say it's probably closer to Laurel, more, and from a technicality standpoint, closer to Laurel Highlands than it is the towpath. I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing, of course, but it was.
Can we agree maybe on the Plateau Trail?
We'll agree on Plateau Trail. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rooty, pretty rocky.
Yeah. Good trail, by the way. Always.
Great trail. It's my favorite.
Yeah. 4 seasons, always good. So I recommend running it. But so Mike, you get in and You're going first 8 miles downhill. What happens after that?
Okay, so you get to the river at that point. You've done 8 downhill miles and you're feeling pretty decent, weather aside, right? But at that point, I had a nice lather going on as far as sweat was concerned. I'm a heavy sweater, by the way. I've been sweat tested at moderate intensity, 70 degrees. I'm sweating out 2 liters per hour, right? After these 8 miles, even in those conditions, I'm purely saturated. So the question becomes at that point, like, what do you do with your layers? Someone like me, to be honest, I'm sort of damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't in that regard. If I keep the layers on, I'm staying saturated. I'm staying wet and I'm getting cold, right? If I take the layers off, I'm getting cold. And then I run the risk of, like I said, losing core heat that then is going to extend out to my extremities. The Raynaud's really kicks into effect at that point, and your hands just, you lose them. I had a judgment call to make. You get to that 8 mile point, it's time to start climbing up at that point. You got about a 1,500-foot climb up to what you eventually arrive at mile 10 and a half, 11-ish, to the first aid station, Deadwood 1. Made that climb, and I opted to shed the layers. That's what I opted to do. So I'm running in at that point a t-shirt, a pack, and 2 pairs of gloves. But yeah, what happens when you start to climb, right? I had descended to about 3,500 feet, right?
Yeah.
And then it was time to climb again. And so then you're coming back up to 5,000 feet. And by the time I reached that altitude again, it had cooled back down, and I'm reaching for my layers like, okay, it's time to put these back on. Arrive at the aid station, and some quick processing to do. I had to do a pretty solid evaluation at that point. I had completely lost all dexterity in my hands at that point. Couldn't tear open a gel. Couldn't even take my own pack off to take my layers out of the pack and put them back on. I required aid station assistance.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah, right.
And shout out to those volunteers that help with that sort of stuff when someone's in a bad way.
They were awesome.
Yeah, they do a great job. Not to be, remiss of speaking of them, because they do. They were awesome out there. Every single one I encountered was great. So yeah, that's awesome. They helped you get the pack off.
Yeah, volunteers everywhere are great, right? But in particular, I've had a great experience at UTMB races. I really feel like they're well organized, and the folks that volunteer for them are pretty well vested. And I had an extremely positive experience at that aid station. And so, and I arrive, and not surprisingly, there's a ton of carnage at that first aid station. There were numerous drops or people in the process of doing so, mostly due to injury, mostly due to falls. I had a point blank view at a woman in the tent next to me with what appeared to be a broken ankle. It was pretty nasty. And yeah. And so as miserable as I felt, I'm looking around and I'm like, yeah, I'm very fortunate at this moment to just be enduring discomfort, basically. But I'm fairly calculated in my approach. And I knew that, I had a long day ahead of me, and that there was, from a weather standpoint, literally not going to be much light at the end of that tunnel. The degree to which I could have functioned with those hands, even reaching lower elevations, say by the time I reached the 50K mark at Forest Hill and it warmed up into the 50s, I maybe would have seen some relief. But I did. I made a calculated decision at that point, at that first aid station, at only mile 11, to drop the race.
That's tough to do. Like you went all that way, and you got to put your priorities in order, I guess, right? That's what you did. You said you're calculated. You got to put your priorities in order and kind of make that judgment call, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, in terms of overall concerns, or I guess longevity tops all, right? I'm trying to, at age 50, optimize for the long haul as far as aging is concerned. And
Yeah,
that for me trumps everything. I wasn't injured at that point, but I knew that things could quickly go south if my head just wasn't in the game. I mean, when you're not able to fuel, things can very quickly go sideways. And my fear was that I was going to lose focus, perhaps be one of the folks that did take a fall and then have injury to contend with.
The weather that day certainly didn't get any better the lower you went. It was still cold and rainy down at the bottom where we were running the 50K in that loop, driver's flat. I don't know what else it was called, Rob. You might remember, but the weather never got better. Like I was actually a little bit chilly during the 50K, and that's at what, 1,500 feet, I think?
And that maybe, not much more. It was just cold and nasty the whole time, which is crazy because the year before I ran Canyon's 50K, I think it got up to like 81, like 79, 81. It was too hot. Sun was out the whole time, just dumping sweat, refilling the pack constantly. Polar opposite this past year.
Mike, well, obviously you know, with your condition, you think the cold and you prefer the heat like I do. Rob, what do you prefer?
Cold.
You prefer cold? See, I like it warm, I think. I haven't done well in the cold. I don't know.
Well, it depends on how cold.
Yeah, I would not have been happy with that. You sweat, then you take the layers off, but you're still wet and you're still cold. Like you can't ever find that. I can be hot and be okay.
If it's that cold and it's a fast race, I'm okay with that. But if it's slow and a lot of people, single track, you're not moving very fast, either because the terrain's super technical or just the number of people, that's where it sucks.
Yeah.
But if it's like a road race, like a, half marathon road race, it can be in the 20s and I'm fine because you can just book it and your core temperature, at least for myself, heats up to a degree that I'm fine with it. But if it's a slow race and it's cold 30s, low 40s, no, that's too cold for me.
Yeah. So Mike, I didn't envy you at all up there. Like I was pretty cold down there, and especially the wake up time. And yeah, it was a rough day for you, but sometimes you have to make a pivot in life, right?
Sometimes that's the case. Yeah. And of course, what was next was not exactly on the mind at that moment, at that aid station. Right. I mean, of course I was in a self-preservation mode, right? Yeah. Again, the avoidance of injury, the avoidance of severe discomfort. I'm no stranger to discomfort. I can't think of many ultra runners who are, right. I've run some races in some pretty nasty weather. Example given, 2021 Burning River, torrential downpour, 2023 Burning River 50 miler, again, torrential downpour, right. So yeah, you find yourself in each situation is unique. I wasn't exactly in my backyard. Yeah, it was the prudent decision for me. Rode the van out of there, the UTMB. I got a shout out to the crew. I'll just use the term extracted the drops, and it was nice because I was in a van. People that could certainly empathize, one of which was an elite female runner who shall go nameless here, but
drop names, Mike. That's what we like to do.
No, I'm not going to do that.
We haven't had a button, Mike. We haven't had a button.
Yeah. So anyway, this unnamed runner who we don't know who she is, she's on the bus with you. The crews are back to the start line. I guess they're taking you to the finish line, right?
Taking us to the finish. That's where the group voted to go. Yeah, it was back to the finish line. We had some options. We had some options. Yeah, right. Forest Hill was one of those options. We're like, no, let's just go back to the finish. That's where the food is.
That's where the food and beer are. Yeah, get us there.
Right. So yeah, it was nice to kind of be able to, to be. I wasn't in that van alone. That felt, I guess, comforting to a degree. I mean, there were some, like I said, some injuries there, but certainly others who dropped for the same reasons or similar reasons that I did. And
yeah, you go out looking for a hot weather race, and it's a winter snowstorm. I mean, I get it. So I mean, it would have been tough. It would have been tough for me not to seeing that weather drop to the 50K. If I was signed up for the 100K and ready for it, it would have been tough for me to run 100K in that for sure. Yeah, you live and you learn, and you learned, and you get back to the start finish line where I unfortunately saw you as I crossed. I was, oh yeah, because it's disappointing. I knew you were running the 100K, and obviously you weren't running the 100K anymore. So I saw you as I came across the finish line, and what happened then?
The real reason I dropped was to see you finish.
Well, I figured I didn't want to say that, but I imagined.
No, that was nice, but yeah. So I mean, obviously, you're standing there at the finish line. You're watching runners come in, and what's interesting is like, I was able to go back to our Airbnb and shower and kind of, some time went by, right? I'm fast forwarding a bit here, but it seemed like just moments after I got back to the finish line, Francesco Pupi was crossing the finish line, winning the 100K race, setting a course record, running in those conditions, right? Which proves that, like, obviously certain conditions favor certain folks who are able to excel in those conditions.
Yeah, that's good conditions for the Euros. I feel like that's prime conditions for those guys.
Yeah. But of course, I'm standing there and the wheels are turning, right? Like, what's next? Because I was fit to run 100K, and that's what I came out to Northern California to do. Bulb went on. I have a friend who lives in the Bay Area who I knew was running the Miwok 100K, also a Western States qualifier, a very storied race. It's been around a long time. The David Gogginses have run that race. It's got a lot of history. Knowing that race was taking place, but also knowing that it was pretty much full. It was a quick thought, but it ultimately ended up being the direction of my pivot. Was able to secure a spot sort of last minute, wait list kind of thing. And the weather for that race was the polar opposite, right? It was the antithesis of the Canyons situation. It was an absolutely ideal day. That's the direction I ended up going.
Yeah, a little bit nicer weather down there in the Bay Area. Beautiful area.
Yeah, for those not familiar, that race starts and finishes in Stinson Beach. It's mostly run on coastal trail, the vast majority of which is single track. That area is, of course, not mountainous, but it is quite hilly. From a profile standpoint, that course is quite similar to Canyons, actually, in terms of having approximately the same amount of vert, just shy of 12,000 feet of vert, mostly non-technical. It's a race that I was trained, that I had trained to run. And I thought, well, if I can squeeze into it, which I was fortunately able to do, I felt like I could give it a good run.
And you did, and that's a tough decision to make. You drop one, and did you make? Maybe you did. I'd like to think you did. Did you make the decision when we were at the bar drinking beer, by any chance?
I'll be honest, I can't exactly remember when exactly that may have been it. The beer may have something to do with the fact that I can't remember exactly.
The beer and Casey helped make the decision, right?
Yeah.
We all agree.
Always good for bad advice. Add a little alcohol in, and
Now it's good advice,
We'll say the beers kind of solidified the decision to make the pivot. Yeah. But no, it was exciting. And I was fortunate, very, very fortunate, in the sense that not only was I able to secure a spot, but I have, that friend in the Bay Area that I mentioned who was running that race. So to kind of be able to go out there and stay with him, it made it possible from a logistical standpoint.
Does that race go through Sausalito?
I believe it does.
It's real close if it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes down by Golden Gate Bridge, through Sausalito, through the Mount Tam watershed, along the Bolinas Ridge, which takes you through redwoods, which is gorgeous. I had a fellow runner tell me, he's like, look, if you want to see redwoods, you come to Bolinas Ridge. I never knew that. It was a beautiful area, certainly a very fruitful gain as far as visual stimulation was concerned, right? I'm not throwing shade on the Canyons course, but in those conditions, let's be honest, it was foggy and there wasn't a ton to see, right? But I had a perfectly sunny day to work with at Miwok, and it was just picture perfect, gorgeous.
Yeah, it was on ultra sign up. It looked like you did pretty well in the race.
Yeah, I mean, for being my first 100K, I felt like I held my own, especially, let's be honest, I mean, we live in Ohio, right? And so we can't train, on courses like that with the big ups and big downs. And, you just try to simulate that as best you can here locally. Fairly solidly a mid-pack runner here in Ohio. I oftentimes will travel out west to race and find myself barely in the mid-pack, right? Sometimes in the back of the pack. So I feel like, coming into this race season, I had made some fitness gains that were going to make me more competitive. And that proved to be the case. I think there were 50 starters, exactly 50 starters in the 50 to 59 age group, only 31 of which finished the race. And I placed 9 out of those 31. So
that's pretty damn good right there.
Hell yeah.
I feel pretty decent about it.
It is different runners out there. I was telling Will and Jeremy, because I finished about the same, I guess, UTMB index score that I have out here. But these guys and women, there was no walking hills. Like every hill we came to, we were just pounding every hill. And it just, mile 20, we're still, like, these guys are still running up hills. And it's like, holy shit, like they don't do that out east. Like, we're walking this thing for sure out east. And
Power hike.
Oh, power hike. Yeah. I forgot power hike. Yeah. We're power hiking out here. So yeah, it's a whole different level of runner out there, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Very much agreed. 100%. Yeah. I mean, not only, are the fields are more fit.
Yes, for sure.
But at the same time, they're also deeper. I feel like, particularly in a race like Miwok, to be honest, a race that has a 15 and a half hour cutoff. And pretty tight cutoffs at the aid stations throughout, okay, versus a UTMB race, which, credit to UTMB, I mean, they promote inclusion. And, a 20-hour cutoff on a Canyons 100K is intended to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's intended to help the first-time 100K runner that has to zombie walk to the finish, right? Miwok is no such animal. It doesn't even pretend to be that. And they promote it as such, like, hey,
we're getting in and out. We're doing it.
We're getting in and out. Our permits require that. That's a big part of it. Their permits require that they be wrapped up in that time frame. Fortunately, I stayed ahead of those cutoffs, and like I said, I feel like I ran a pretty solid race. Nutrition was pretty well dialed. Hydration was dialed. From an execution standpoint, it went as planned.
A little bit easier when the weather's nice, I guess. It's sunny warm and birds are chirping and things like that. So you get to the start line. Dude, what was your confidence level like? That was my biggest question with this is you just had a DNF Canyons, and that no matter why you DNF, I feel like you didn't achieve your goal. It probably has to sting a little bit. Hey, I didn't do what I set out to do. So that hurts. You turn right around the next week, come back for Miwok. Did you have any doubts when you were standing on the start line, or were you like, I did the work, the hay's in the barn, so to speak. Let's just see what we can do.
Anyone who hasn't finished a race of the distance they're attempting, right? There's got to be a little bit of doubt there, right? Inherently. And I think that's the extent to which I was feeling it. To be honest with you, I was confident in my fitness, and I knew that I was primed to run that course, handle that vert, deal with it, in what turned out to be ideal weather conditions. Frankly, I will reveal the subtitle to my Strava post on this now, which was simply this. It was, the reason I DNF'd the Canyons was that I didn't want to freeze my ass off all day. And that was not at all an issue at Miwok a week later. So my confidence was actually pretty high. And yeah, so I feel like I was able to execute without much hindrance in that regard.
Good. I'm
It's a
glad
great
to hear
comeback
that.
story.
Yeah, because I do. I mean, there's a lot of people I think that would have had a big confidence shot, coming back the next week after they, didn't complete the goal that they wanted to. And that takes a lot of resilience to do. And just to stand there, hey, you know why you did it. It wasn't like you got to mile 30 and just fell apart and all the gaskets blew off. Yeah, I was cold and I couldn't use my hands, and here I am today, and it's nice weather, sun shining, things are going my way. Let's go, right?
Exactly. That's it in a nutshell. The DNF didn't happen because I wasn't fit enough to cover that distance or to handle the course. It was almost purely conditions related, and yeah, so I was able to go into Miwok feeling pretty confident. I think it also helped that I had run, the big Alta course out there 6 weeks prior, right there in Marin County. And so I just, from a terrain standpoint, I knew exactly what I was up against. So that helped as well.
Yeah, that always helps being familiar with the, I guess, local type of trail, what you're gonna do. What was the furthest you had run up until Miwok?
350 milers, Burning River 50 on 2 occasions, 2021, 2023. And then I ran the Mohican 50 miler last summer, June of 2024.
Both pretty tough courses. It can be extremely hot for both of those races, right?
Yeah, they were both. Yeah, of course. I mean, I mentioned the torrential downpours of the 2 years at Burning River, but nevertheless, it was 70 plus degrees, right? There was no loss of dexterity in the hands. Those were warm weather races, no question.
And it gets up to 80 with 100% humidity and can barely breathe. So yeah, tough. Those are tough conditions. So you had some experience going into the longer distances before this, right?
Yeah, yeah, and they say, I mean, if you can run a 50 miler, you can run 100K, and so yeah, it wasn't a huge leap. I think perhaps the biggest challenge was handling the vert. Where a course like a Mohican, for instance, which is about as hilly as they come here in Northeast Ohio, right? That course, the 50 miler has like 6,500 feet of vert, which is like half of what you're faced with at a Miwok or a Canyons, right?
Yeah. Well, we had Jess Brazeau on, and she made a pretty good point that it is tough to run out here because it's so undulating. You're going straight up, but then straight down. You just never. She was of the mindset, I think, that I can climb for 2 miles. That's fine. I'm in my climbing mode, where she has to switch modes every. I guess we do get good training out here, right, Mike? Right, Rob?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, CBNP is a gift. It's a secret. I think when people experience it, they're like, okay, I get it.
It's not easy running here. It's not buttery smooth trails. There's roots, there's rocks, there's turns. We have a lot of turns. Turns are slow, I found out.
I would have to agree, Casey. Yeah,
I appreciate that.
no, I do. I'm not trying to sell this area short, and with regard to its difficulties. It's certainly some hard trail running here in its own right, but I feel like it is void of the big climbs and the big descents, though. So you kind of, whether you choose to simulate those on a treadmill or whatever, means you may employ, I've run my share of hill repeats on the local Dogwood Hill.
Yeah, we got dogwood. We always have dogwood, like
that we do.
Which, hey, tough trail to run out there. So, but anyway, I'm sorry. Back to Miwok. So you get about let's start at the halfway point of Miwok. Take us through that. You're ahead of the cutoff at the halfway point, because I was following along. You're ahead by a decent bit, right?
Yeah, I was well ahead of the cutoffs throughout the day, and that felt good. I mean, that gives you even more confidence. Your confidence actually builds throughout the day, right? Because frankly, the cutoff of 15 and a half hours was, give or take, kind of like what I was kind of my target finish time for Canyons, right?
Yeah.
if it were a warm weather race, right? If you had the warm weather to contend with, that was going to be like a 15, 16-hour deal for me, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, to be able to, I think I finished Miwok in like 13:51. So, I was well ahead of those cutoffs throughout the day, and fortunate in that regard. I felt good about the fact that, I think I turned an ankle once. It was, it wasn't really a problematic situation, recovered from it pretty well. Again, nutrition was dialed. I'm fueling with 90 grams of carbs, and that seems to be like the fit for me.
Well, you're not doing the 200 an hour?
No, no, I haven't quite climbed to that level yet, but
Not sure my intestines can handle that, but
the 90 seems to work for me. And yeah, I think for me too, the key is just taking it in every 20 minutes. So back to your question regarding where I stood at the halfway point. Like I said, felt pretty good at the halfway point. For me, let's be honest, all races have highs and lows, right? Where did the real low come? I think there's an out and back section, basically ends the race. You're going out on the Bolinas Ridge. Gosh, I'll be honest, the final aid station name is escaping me at the moment. I apologize, and then you're just coming all the way back to Stinson Beach on the Bolinas Ridge, and it's at that final aid. It is actually not the final aid station. It's the 49-mile aid station. 49-mile aid station is where you can pick up a pacer. Okay. And for good reason. You've done most of the climbing at that point because the course is kind of front loaded in that regard. The trip along Bolinas Ridge is relatively flat, just undulating, but you're pretty well spent at that point. At least most people are. I can certainly see the appeal in having a pacer from that point. I did not. Obviously, it wasn't part of my plan. I didn't arrange for that. To each their own, of course. I doubt that I'll ever run a race with a pacer. I'm kind of more of the European mindset in that regard. I feel like races should be your own. And that's, again, I don't want to offend or take anything away from those who employ that method. It's certainly within the race rules.
I don't mind.
Right.
Yeah. I'm with you. So I don't think that if you're trying to be like 1 through 10, I don't think you should be allowed to have a pacer. To me, it's not a team sport. It's your own. You're competing against others. You need to still be with it mentally and physically. You can't have guidance in either. You can have the coaching at the aid stations. That's fine, but I don't think you should get a run along coach with you late in a race when it matters. Pacing matters. People doing whatever. I'm with you, Mike. I'm not going to have any pacers, but that's a whole other.
I second that. You got to suffer alone, right?
Yeah.
That's where I stand. Yeah.
So you texted me after, Mike, not doing another 100K. Have you changed your mind yet?
Yeah, I changed my mind like 2 days later.
Sounds about right.
Certainly the spur of the moment thing there is, I'm never doing this again, right? That's what type 2 fun is all about, right? Like, it's miserable in the moment, but you look back on it's a lot of fun to look back on.
So what'd you sign up for?
There's some more races on the calendar this year. Next one coming up is the Finn Melanson's resurrected race, the Twisted Fork 68K, Park City, Utah. That's coming up here in just 3 weeks, June 14th, I believe.
Okay.
And then we're going back out. I say we, that includes my wife, who also does these things. We're going back out to Utah at the end of July to run Speed Goat 28K, which is, I would argue, the hardest 28K in North America.
Yeah, it's
kicked the hell out of me 2 years ago, and I'm going back for redemption. I feel like I can improve substantially upon the debacle that I experienced there a couple years ago. Then we've got Grindstone 50K coming up That'll be sort of a tune-up for then the Kodiak 100K back out to California in mid-October.
Nice little schedule here. A little bit of traveling for sure.
Yeah, dual income, no kids. What can I say?
Dinks. I can appreciate that, Mike. That's
it in a nutshell.
Yep. Mike, we certainly appreciate you telling us the story. Awesome story. And I think there's a lot to learn from it that, hey, today's not your day, but next Saturday at 5:30 a.m. sure might be, right?
Absolutely. I guess there's an overarching message that I would put forth, and it would just be go into each event just knowing as much about yourself as you can. And if you do that, whatever decision you make, whether it be to power through adversity or to drop a race at mile 11 of 62, right? If you know yourself well, you'll make the prudent decision.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Hobby Jogger. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation today. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support keeps us moving forward. Until next time, keep those feet moving and enjoy the miles.